reminder that during recording, you have the option to share yourself on video or through audio. And if you do not wish to be recorded, you do not have to do either of those. Or you also may choose to leave this session, and we will be posting this on our website so you can refer to it later. But good afternoon, everyone. My name is Diane Trujillo. I am the Director of Programs with Serve Washington. I believe at this point I have met most, if not all of you, and I will be going through these slides today along with Thomas Darnell, who I'm sure you're all aware of. And Lou Thompson will be joining us. She's coming over from another meeting. And so they will be able to assist with our Q&A session at the end if you have any questions that pertain to that. All right, let's get started. So again, just some housekeeping items to please sign in with your name and organization in the chat box. This is for record keeping on our end. Even if we know you're here, it's important for us to have the record of you signing in. And just a friendly reminder, this call is intended for continuation applicants. So you should be in year 2 or 3 of your 3-year cycle. If you happen to be on the wrong call and are a new and recompete program, go ahead and hop off and touch base with us and we'll point you in the right direction. Please silence your phones, use the features. There is a closed caption feature that you'll see at the bottom of your screen, and you're able to activate that on your end at any time. And as I mentioned before, we are recording this. All right, I'm going to go through the process and timeline, some key highlights, some helpful tips and tricks. And like I mentioned, we'll have a Q&A session at the end where all of us will kind of tag team and help each other out answering any questions that you may have. I know quite a few of you have been through this before and can probably facilitate this on your own, but we will keep this short, but make sure we address any questions that may pop up. So just a reminder of the RFGA process. You submit your grant and e-grants. The Serve Washington Commission reviews and votes. There is that clarification period if needed. And then your application will be submitted to AmeriCorps. Upon their review, there may be an additional clarification if needed. And then those awards will be made and you will get your program and AmeriCorps members to get active and start serving in your community. If you're in good standing, chances are that second step will most likely not apply to you. So you have all seen the RFGA timeline by this point. This was embedded in the RFGA. So obviously you're now here at step 2. And just a reminder that the grant due date is October 3rd at 5 p.m. Of course, we always recommend trying to get that in early because you all are aware at this point how eGrants operates. Better to be safe than sorry, because that is a hard deadline of 5 p.m. on October 3rd. And then you will see the future dates beyond that where our staff will be reviewing for compliance. I want to add in that I'm really of the mindset, and I believe our whole team is, of wanting you to succeed, wanting you to do well, no surprises. So we will do our best with whatever restrictions we have of correcting any errors that we may see in your budget. While we can't write your grant for you, if we see anything that really stands out, we'll definitely do everything we can within our power to give you the opportunity to make those corrections before we move forward with submitting those applications to AmeriCorps by that date you see there of January 9th. We hope to notify all successful applicants in mid-April, and the clarification and revision period, if applicable, will happen after that. And then you should get your awards issued by mid-July 2025. Oops, I'm seeing that some of these dates are off, so I apologize about that. That should be 2026. after December. So some key highlights, NOFO items that do not apply to serve Washington applicants are the dates. So as I'm sure you're aware, the dates in the NOFO are separate than the RFGA. We have to adhere to those dates in the NOFO, whereas programs have to follow the dates in the RFGA. You would not want to send any additional documents requested to AmeriCorps. Instead, you would send those directly to us at that Serve Washington email address that you all are aware of, as shown on here, and any additional evaluation reports if necessary in your application. Some NOFO items that do apply to Serve Washington are you want to really, I know the NOFO can be very long and wordy and very cumbersome. So if you focus on pages 10 through 17, that should give you the help that you're specifically looking for in a continuation grant. Your page limit is 11 pages, so that is different than last year. And you certainly don't have to use all the space. But just a reminder, we all know how eGrants is in terms of formatting and printing. And I know in the past when I've submitted grants that a lot of times it appeared to me that I was within the page restrictions, and then I would print it out or I'd move one thing around and then suddenly I wasn't in the page restrictions. So just a reminder to try to print those out, and that eGrants does default to double spacing. So pay close attention to that because that is an important rule with your grant application. There has been no change in the MSY maximum cost, so that is the same, I believe, as last year. And then the living allowance has increased the minimum and as well as the maximum. So you'll see those amounts there as well as in your RFGA. I did check yesterday again, just to make sure, even though we are transitioning to that single vendor of TrueScreen, and that is happening by the end of November, just another thing to keep on your radar. The cost should stay the same at this point. So what you've been budgeting for your criminal history checks, you can stay consistent with that as well. And then you will have, you want to double check the national performance measures and make sure you're using fiscal year 25. Some other reminders about continuation applications: make sure that you're going to the correct one. So you're not starting a new application, you're going to that continuation renewal. And even though you're a continuation, it seems like everything will often be straightforward, but just pay special attention if there's any changes, and just go through the NOFO best practices, just refamiliarize yourself with it. If there's no changes, you can always enter NA, but also remember, if there have been any changes in your organization or program, staff changes, even if it's something that might feel minor to you, highly recommend to include those in your continuation changes. And just simple and clear. If it's been a staff change, you could say, Joe Smith departed on December 1st, 2023. Betty Lou started on January 15th, 2024. Whatever those minor changes are, and don't feel that you need to go into great depth with explanation. Although you do not need to make changes in your original narratives, if you have any changes to your evaluation plan, please make sure to talk to your program officer first. And then in your budget, Thomas will go into more detail with this, but please be sure to pay attention to those details for expansion. All right, I think this is me, and then I'll pass it off to Thomas. Reminder to ask for what you need. If your enrollment history is at or above 90%, then you should feel at more liberty. Again, this is a suggestion to request an increase in MSY. However, if you're struggling below 90% with your enrollment, it wouldn't be advisable to increase an expansion, and request money at a proportional rate. Show that your program needs it and how those increases will be distributed. And there's always no guarantee if you request those increases, and you would need to amend your budget, and always make sure that you navigate and clearly define those changes in your continuation narrative. So if someone's reading through your application and they can clearly see there's a remarkable change in the budget, they should easily be able to go back to the narrative in your continuation and cross and be able to double check that both are replicated there. And then I wanted to provide this match update as it will impact competitive programs with fiscal year 25 that if there's any programs on the call that are in that year 10 plus, rather than being at the 50% match, you will now be at 30. So that should be some great news. And then the other years are proceeding prior to that year 10. Some more eGrants tips. Make sure you create your application pieces outside of eGrants. I mentioned this earlier, but eGrants does double space. It's really great to use those all caps between the section headings because the formatting is so simplified and it's hard to sometimes see the delineation between each section. So having that all caps, it makes it easier on the eyes. And remember to stay away from bold, italics, and charts. And the spacing isn't always perfect, and always use that save button. While we know there is a new platform coming to replace eGrants, that will not be in place by the time your applications are due on October 3rd. So we all have at least one more grant cycle submitting through eGrants. Whether that's good news or bad news, that's the way things stand today. Some more application tips, just another reminder to read the instructions. It's easy to kind of breeze through these continuation applications, but just remember to go through and make sure all your numbers match up. Have your project dates updated. Always print a copy for your review. And I mentioned this also earlier, but we give ourselves a deadline. I think I gave myself a deadline of 2 weeks to get all of your applications in and pass those over to AmeriCorps. So I would suggest doing the same, or what works with your work style and your deadlines. All right, so I will pass it off to Thomas, and I will also actually give a break if anyone has any questions so far.
Great. Thanks, Dan. Doesn't sound like we're getting questions. So I don't think we actually have a cost reimbursement program on the call, but for posterity, I will go through this since we're recording it. As usual, we haven't switched from eGrants for this cycle, so we'll be using the eGrant system. So as usual, the budget narrative requires specific line items with precise calculations. So whatever money ends up in your budget, there needs to be a calculation that reaches that number in the appropriate section. Make sure to be transparent about the calculations. Don't just group a bunch of things together without breaking down the costs. For salary and fringe, remember to identify the positions that are going to be on the grant and separate them out. Make sure that it's very easy to tell which positions are referenced for each fringe benefit category as well as a salary. And then we can go to the next slide. Yep, and as usual, when you make adjustments to the direct costs in section 1 or 2, it will affect the percentage, how the percentage applies to that number in the admin section, section 3. I think that any of our reimbursement continuations actually have a federally approved rate, so I don't need to dwell on the de minimis indirect rate being raised, but it has been. Don't forget to use the source of funds. This is common for programs to forget this, but all sources of match funding should be listed separately, and the numbers need to add up to the grantee share of your budget. I'd also just reiterate what Diane had said earlier about the match schedule, which for our reimbursement continuation programs, they will be matching at that 30% rate for this cycle. And we can go to the next slide. So for fixed, again, nothing has really changed with the new system. It might, but for right now, the biggest thing is don't forget the source of funds. And of course, the checklist on page 35 of the instructions will apply to all budget types. So make use of that. And I think I can probably pass it on.
Okay, thanks, Thomas. Are there any questions specific to budgets or Thomas that we can answer right now? You can either unmute yourself or type those in the chat.
Hi, yeah, this is Ashley from Service Corps. So I do have a question. I think I know the answer, Thomas, but just want to make sure we're on the right page. So with the increase in the minimum living allowance, which we love to see, right? But knowing our Service Corps grant, and we tend to come in at a pretty low cost per MSY because of the number of member positions we ask for, we are anticipating having to increase that cost per MSY during continuation, which is not traditional, obviously, but I think we have done at least one other time since I've been here in the last couple competitive cycles. So my biggest question is, we feel we have to do that so that we keep our placement fees at the same level that they're at right now, so that we're not putting that burden on our sites to have to now fill that gap for this increased minimum. Last time, I believe we had to make sure we had support from Serve Washington. Granted, we know that there is an opportunity for AmeriCorps to say no, and then that's put on us. But last time we did ask for support in writing, and then I believe we had to go into the narrative and explain why we were asking for that increase. So I just want clarification that that is that we are on the right path when we looked at the NOFO and saw that increase, that is what we have to do in the continuation. And this is just for Service Corps, Reading Corps. We don't have to do this.
That sounds reasonable. I think.
Okay.
Do you remember what year that?
I do not, but I don't think it would take us, wouldn't take me too long to figure it out. I mean, Sandy and Carrie are on the call with me, and I'm like looking at them that they don't know it. I believe we had to do it with Reading Corps one of the years. You know, our grants are on off cycles for a reason, so I just have to track down which one it is. But I believe we did do this within the last, I would say, like 3 or 4 years. And I can go find that.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sure Diane and I and the team can kind of review what was done last time and kind of see what, work with you to see what's appropriate going forward with that. But of course, we definitely want to support you in getting the resources you need.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. And I do have one other question, and it's around timeline. So I know last year, and I want to preface this, like, I recognize we are in continuation for both of our grants, but the October 3rd due date, is that going to kind of be like the new normal? And I'm asking because last year it was bumped up 2 weeks earlier, so it was like mid-October. And it was explained why, which we totally understand. You know, Sir Washington staff deserve to also enjoy the holidays and not be doing grant review, and the same with the commission. I will just be completely frank, like I saw that October 3rd date and was very surprised by it, just because that's a very quick turnaround time. But if we know that that is gonna be the new expected due date moving forward, then we can plan accordingly, because we will be in recompete next year for Reading Corps. And that basically takes a month away from our planning. And Diane, just to what you said, we like to submit early just in case anything goes wrong. So I was just curious if this is going to be like the new expected time frame so that we can plan accordingly moving forward.
Yeah, that's a great question, and thank you for bringing that up. So I really looked at last year's timeline, and from what I understood, last year's RFGA was released later than we released it this year. So I think that's how I kind of justified bumping up the timeline a little bit and then keeping the other dates as much on par as I could. I do see that the NOFO states the federal agency is accepting applications a couple weeks later this year, and I was told they're doing that in anticipation of, they thought the new grants was going to be in place by then, so they had kind
Oh,
of
okay.
moved their expectations back. I think next year, we should all, serve Washington included, plan on a similar timeline. As far
Okay.
as the RFGA, I would love to get it out even sooner. So maybe next year, no guarantees, because it obviously depends on when the NOFO is released. But obviously, as I'm becoming more familiar and oriented in my position, I could get that out sooner. And then I would love, with your feedback, maybe to push, not only get it out sooner, but push programs due date out a little bit. So maybe we can find a happy medium in that, because
Yeah.
I know exactly what you mean. I felt the same way with the formula applications last spring. I felt like the due date that window keeps getting smaller and smaller.
Yeah.
So I understand where you're coming from, and I'll definitely do my best to make it a little bit longer next year.
Yeah. Thank you.
Of course. Are there any other questions so far? We've got just a couple more slides, and then we'll of course open it up for Q&A. All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and move on. So here's a little something extra, just a reminder about that CDC Social Vulnerability Index that I'm sure you're all aware of, and the commitment to DEIA. And so just to make sure that we're being culturally responsive in our service activities and making sure to document that in our applications. Obviously, with continuation grants, those items should already be documented. So not a whole lot of updates to do on your end, but just kind of a reminder for us all, and then lending ourselves to those opportunities of providing additional benefits and development opportunities to members. I know that Micaiah will be presenting about this year's equity grants on Tuesday at our sub-grantee meeting, which you all have probably been receiving lots of reminders from me about that sub-grantee meeting on Tuesday morning. So if you were a recipient of those equity grants last year, or you want to know how those will be rolled out this year, she should be providing some information that day. I also wanted to be very transparent with some language I've caught in the NOFO. I know that we hear a lot in the AmeriCorps world about possible decreases in funding. We've seen that last spring during our formula grant making. And a lot of times that can feel a little ambiguous and vague, like, well, what does that mean? It's more competitive, or how much is going to get cut? And we really just don't know, especially in the competitive application world. But I really did want to pull this verbatim from the NOFO, that obviously you are all in a continuation cycle. And so that doesn't necessarily mean it's as competitive as new or recompete. But I just want to remind everyone, for sake of transparency, that continuation awards for future years are not guaranteed. They obviously depend on future appropriations and satisfactory performance. There's still appropriations happening at the federal level. We don't know what those amounts are. And I don't want to incite fear by saying we have any reason to believe that you wouldn't be
Okay.
funded, but definitely just want to be as transparent as possible with the information we're given. So that language behind it's a little bit more competitive, or we might receive less funding. So you will also see that in your NOFO. So now I want to open it up for the Q&A session. Reminder, I'm sure you've all seen this email address now that we're in application season. Any questions you have specific to your grant application, you will send to that specific address. Those emails will be sent to me. I think they're currently being routed to my Kia and they're supposed to be sent my way. So you will be receiving responses from me or someone involved with Serve Washington's application process. But I'd love to open this up for any questions or thoughts you all have. And I see Lou is also available now for questions that may pertain to them. Lou, while I have you, is there anything you would want to add for to make continuation? Yeah, good question. No questions so far, but if there's any additions you want to add, that would be great. I'm not sure if you have necessarily anything.
Yeah, usually as long as programs aren't proposing to make changes to performance measures, which generally we recommend that you don't in a continuation year, then it's pretty straightforward. You shouldn't have to be worrying about evaluation related items. So, but if anything has changed significantly with your evaluation, your approved plan, or if you do need to make some changes to your performance measures, even though it is a continuation year, then definitely let me know and we can work that out. But otherwise, ideally, there's nothing to worry about.
Great, thank you. Thomas, is there anything I may have missed? It's very likely this is my first time doing these.
I didn't notice anything obvious, but looks like Brandy joined the call. So we do have a cost reimbursable program present now. So maybe just call attention again to the change in grantee share to 30%
Sure, I can
from
go back.
50%.
Are you seeing that, Brandy? We just wanted to make sure you were aware. So this would apply to you because this begins federal fiscal year 25, which is obviously the application you'll be submitting. So hopefully this is good news for you.
It is. Thank you. I think you hear me now. Am I here?
Yes, yes. Did you have any questions surrounding this or anyone else that we can answer? All right, well, I'm not hearing any questions. So I will stay on for another couple minutes just in case anyone has anything last minute. I will go back to that email address to make sure one more time we're all looking at the same thing, and be sure to submit questions to that at any time. Thank you so much for your time today, and we look forward to continuing to partner with you all. Sean, I just saw your pop up on Teams. Yes, a recording will be offered, and I did mention that at the beginning of the call earlier too. So I believe those are usually posted on the website, correct?
Did you stop recording?
Oh, thank you, Thomas.